This is where the Roman Empire is born from chaos, and where destiny starts pulling Augustus and Livia toward each other, though they don't meet yet. It's the calm before the storm. The fire had been burning for days, not just in the streets of Rome, but in the hearts of its people. The Republic was dying. Ashes of the Senate's pillars still floated in the wind, mixing with the smell of blood and fear. Men who once called each other brothers, now killed in the name of freedom. The city that had conquered the world couldn't even save itself. And somewhere between the ruins and the roars, a young man watched silently. Gaius Octavius, barely 20 years old. Caesar's adopted son. Too young to be feared, too calm to be understood. He stood on the balcony of his uncle's old villa, eyes tracing the smoke curling above the city. Behind him, soldiers waited for orders, ragged, restless, loyal. But Octavian said nothing. Not yet. He wasn't like the others who shouted for revenge or glory. His silence was sharper than any sword. Inside the hall, his general Agrippa entered, armor scratched, voice rough. "Rome's collapsing, my lord. Antony's men are moving toward the Forum. We should strike before sunrise." Octavian didn't move. "And if we win?" he asked quietly. "Do you think the people will thank another killer?" Agrippa frowned. "They'll thank whoever saves them." Octavian turned then, slowly, eyes calm like deep water. "No, Agrippa. They'll thank whoever gives them peace. I'll be that man." And that was the moment, the very moment, when history changed its breath. That night, under a red sky, Octavian began what no man had dared. He would end the Republic, not by destroying it, but by making it love him first. Days became weeks. The war with Mark Antony stretched across the Mediterranean like a dark storm. Each letter that reached Rome carried a new rumor. Another city taken, another betrayal whispered. But Rome's people were tired. They didn't want another hero. They wanted sleep. Octavian gave them that, carefully, strategically. He rebuilt temples, reopened markets, and paid soldiers with his own gold. He called himself Princeps, the first citizen, not emperor. He made them believe they still had freedom, while quietly taking it away. And soon, they adored him for it. One evening, after a long day of speeches, he walked alone through the marble corridor of his palace. The moonlight spilled across the floor like liquid silver. He paused before Caesar's statue, the man who had started it all. "They worship you now," he murmured. "But they killed you when you needed them most." His voice trembled, not with sadness, but something darker. "I won't make that mistake. Rome doesn't need another god. It needs a king who pretends he isn't one." Outside, thunder rolled across the Tiber. A storm was coming. Somewhere, far from the palace, a woman would soon step into his life. A woman who would understand power the way he did. But fate wasn't ready yet. That woman's name was Livia Drusilla, and she was still married to another man. But the world outside Rome was already moving toward them. In Egypt, the sands still carried whispers of Cleopatra, the queen who died for love. Her story haunted every Roman banquet, the woman who wrapped herself in a carpet and won a Caesar's heart. In the east, the Parthians waited like vultures, ready to strike if Rome fell again. In the far lands of China, the Han dynasty was at its golden peak, silk, science, and serenity, unaware that their future enemy was learning to build empires out of ashes. And across the oceans, tribes unknown to Rome sang to stars Rome didn't even know existed. But for Rome, all roads led to one thing: Octavian's throne. A year later, the Senate met in silence. Old men who once screamed against monarchy now stood trembling before the boy who had become a legend. They crowned him with words, not gold. "Hail Augustus," they said, "the first of Rome." He smiled faintly, bowing his head. The people cheered outside, tossing flowers as soldiers wept. Rome finally had peace. But deep inside, Augustus felt something missing, something he couldn't name. He had power, loyalty, and fear, but not love. He looked down at the city below and whispered, almost to himself, "Power means nothing if there's no one to share it with." The crowd's cheers echoed like thunder, but his heart stayed quiet. He didn't know that the one person who could understand that silence, the one who would love him and destroy him at the same time, was already out there, walking through the gardens of another man's villa. Her laughter would soon reach his palace like a song through the night, and Rome would never be the same again. And that was how the empire was born. Not from glory, not from victory, but from loneliness. Every empire begins with a wound, and every ruler, no matter how powerful, begins with a dream they're too afraid to name. The palace was alive that night. Golden lamps lined the marble halls, and music echoed through the gardens like laughter carried by the gods. Rome was celebrating peace, the kind that comes after too much death. Senators, generals, poets, and wives filled the grand courtyard, dressed in colors brighter than the city's mood had been in years. Augustus stood at the center, smiling the way a ruler must, gentle, tired, unreadable. Every few moments, another nobleman bowed before him, another hand kissed his ring, another face promised loyalty. He nodded, polite and distant, but his mind wandered elsewhere. He hated these feasts. They felt like cages made of gold, full of people pretending to love him while measuring his weakness. "Try to smile, my lord," whispered Agrippa beside him. "You've given them peace. Let them give you wine." Augustus chuckled under his breath. Peace is easier than pretending to enjoy their company. And then, as if the gods were tired of his boredom, she walked in. Her name was Livia Drusilla, the wife of Tiberius Claudius Nero, a senator twice her age, clever but dull, a man who spoke of politics like others, spoke of love. Livia entered quietly, but the room shifted when she did. She wasn't the kind of beauty that made men stare. She was the kind that made them forget what they were about to say. Tall, graceful, her silver gown glowed under the torchlight. Her eyes, calm, steady, and unafraid, met Augustus's for a single second. And in that 1 second, something ancient moved between them. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. Two souls cut from the same marble, born to rule, born to hide what they truly felt. She bowed slightly. "Caesar," he nodded. "Lady Livia." His voice came softer than he expected. For the rest of the evening, Augustus couldn't focus. The music blurred, the laughter dimmed, and even Agrippa's jokes went unheard. His eyes kept finding her, across the table, across the crowd, always turning away just before he could speak again. Every time she laughed, his heart caught something it didn't understand. At one point, she dropped her fan. Before the servant could move, Augustus was already there. He bent, picked it up, and their hands brushed, a brief touch, electric and forbidden. She met his gaze again, and he saw it clearly this time. Not fear, not excitement, but curiosity. Like she was looking at a man she'd seen before, in a dream she didn't remember. Later that night, after the feast ended, Augustus walked into the empty garden. The air smelled of roses and rain. The city below flickered with torches, whispering the stories of its emperor. He found Livia standing near the fountain, her reflection trembling in the water. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "Neither should you," he replied. A pause, the sound of water falling between them. "You've rebuilt Rome," she said, "but I wonder if you've forgotten how to live in it." He looked at her, really looked. "And you? Do you live in Rome, or only survive in it?" Livia smiled faintly, eyes glinting. "We all survive, Caesar, especially women." Her tone was light, but he caught something underneath, a quiet sadness, the kind that only power and loneliness can share. He stepped closer. "You speak like someone who understands more than she says." "And you," she murmured, "look like someone who feels more than he should." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. The kind of silence that promises something you can't take back. Then came footsteps. Her husband's voice, distant but approaching. "Livia, the carriage is waiting." She turned quickly, her calm mask returning. "I must go." Augustus lowered his head slightly. "Rome will feel emptier when you leave." She hesitated. Rome never stays empty for long. And with that, she walked away, graceful, composed, untouchable. But he knew. He knew. He watched her disappear into the torchlight, and something inside him refused to stay still. The man who had conquered the world had finally met the one thing he couldn't control. That night, Augustus didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the moon that hung like a crown above the Tiber River. Agrippa entered quietly. "You're awake, Caesar?" Augustus didn't look away from the moon. "Do you believe the gods still play with men's hearts?" Agrippa frowned. "Only if the men are foolish enough to let them." Augustus smiled faintly. "Then I'm a fool." The next morning, messengers spoke of unrest in the east, of Parthian spies, of a senator's scandal, but none of it mattered to him. All he could think of was her voice, her calm defiance, the way she said, "We survive." He had seen empires rise and fall, but he had never seen eyes like that. Livia Drusilla, the woman who would soon become his empress, his equal, and his curse, had entered his world like a quiet storm. And deep down, he already knew. Rome had finally found its queen. She walked into his palace and stole his peace. But could love survive in a city that only understood power? Subscribe to Timeless Voices. Because next, you'll see what happens when that forbidden glance turns into a scandal that shakes an empire.